Right, welcome everyone at the next Multi-Network Community Sync. Today is May 14th. I want to continue with the discussion we had last week on the evolution of the pod network, see where we want to kind of set it at. But I see someone added the KubeCon stuff. Do we want to, I'm not sure there's no name. We want to talk about this?
I added this to the agenda because the CFP are closing on 27th of May,
Yeah.
and maybe it would be good to start working or talking maybe about multi-network in KubeCon again and try to get some engagement.
Yeah, that is my idea as well, to get a topic on this, especially since I think we are almost at the some I think by November we will be having some concrete plan on where we want to go, and even probably some concrete alpha version of this, finger crossed. So I think, yeah, I that's my kind of, I want to do that as well. Um, uh, Lionel, you're saying, I'm not sure anyone else willing to kind of, we can create a kind of start a CFP between ourselves, and we can dedicate, like, I think that's, I'm not sure how many people, I think it's up to 2 usually have a say in this. I'm not sure who will want to kind of be part of that. I definitely would like to. And basically the topic would be about this kind of effort that we're doing here, the integration with the array, and where we are taking it, right? I think that will be the gist of it. Not sure, Lionel, you will be willing to kind of contribute to this as well, co-present this?
I already have. I'm already on 2 other talks about the
Oh,
array,
okay.
but I can help if you need help to write some topics or
Sure.
formulate the abstract, etc. I mean, I would be happy to
Oh,
help.
sounds good. All right. So yeah, definitely. I will definitely start something by end of the week, and then I can share with you. If some other folks are willing to kind of join in, let me know, and you can always grab me on the Slack, and yeah, we can get this going. But yeah, I am planning to post some CFP about this effort that we're doing here.
I don't know. I think was it 2 years ago you and Doug presented something or
I think so, right, Doug? I think that was in, when was that? That was in Chicago, right? That was like almost 3 years ago right now. In November, that's going to be 3 years, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or 2, maybe 2. I don't remember. 23 was it? Or 22? Maybe 23. But yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
no, it was
23.
23. It was
Yeah.
23. Now I remember, because yeah, it was 23. Yes. Yeah. So I think to kind of Lionel, any are yours related to strictly the array, or there's anything in relation to this to kind of
well,
keep in mind
well,
what you?
I mean, I'm always linking to this multi-network because I'm working on DRF for this multi-network stuff. So, of
So
course,
what are
it's
your talks gonna be about? Can you, is it something you can share, or I'm not sure, is that something okay or not? Unless you don't want it, then that's fine. But
uh, it's to be honest, it's just abstract and ideas for now. I mean, or it's not so
okay.
clear. It's more like some kind of guidance or how to create a DRA
Oh.
driver, for example,
Mm.
and the working or the stuff around the SROV and stuff like that. I think it's good to explore this path also. It's something that was in the roadmap, so it might be good to include this in the array and see what is possible.
All right. Any other talks? Anyone around this area want to share? I think it's good to kind of synchronize, and at least we don't overlap.
So I definitely was thinking of a similar thing, although I haven't come up with something right now. I still need to formalize like what we can present, and definitely we don't want to overlap, right? Because
Yeah.
if we are saying the same thing, then it doesn't make sense to have two talks. So I guess when we are doing things, we can coordinate amongst ourselves so we don't duplicate stuff. Yeah.
Okay, Gaurav. All right. Anyone else?
I am also gonna submit some talks. Let me see where I wind up. But yeah, also similarly to Lionel, it doesn't matter to me if I'm included in this particular talk or not. And certainly anyone who's interested, Gaurav, like I'd love to help enable people to present and go. I definitely have some interest. I have a couple ideas for talks. I would guess more CNI related. But we can't ignore DRA these days. So there will certainly be mention of DRA and certainly this group. I've been trying to brew up some ideas surrounding like CNI next, and CNI maintainers have been talking about how this DRA changes the landscape for CNI. So I am I'm looking at that direction kind of first. So let me see here. But yeah, bottom line is happy to pitch in one way or another.
All right. Anyone else on the CFPs? All right. Now I want to continue. Maybe before we continue, I think I'm gonna change it because I just want to kind of let you know I did some progress on the POC, and if someone wants to try something, what I'm doing. So I've been playing around, messing around with the DRA net driver because I think it kind of has the complete, at least the API side and integration with NRI and DRA side sorted out. It's working the way we want it. So I am writing on that and hacking slashing that as much as I can. So what I did was to, just as a first thing, add support for Lionel's status, right? So I added some changes to update the DRA-net with ability to post into the status of the resource claim the MAC address, Ethernet interface name, and IP addresses if they are assigned. So DRA-net has some problems with the IP kind of handling. So I think I tweaked that, but the deletion doesn't work properly when you destroy the pod. It's losing the IP. But if you assign an IP there and push it into the pod, then I saw it's being listed. So I'm trying to find a link because I've even pushed this to. Give me a sec. Let me find it here. If someone wants to look at it, we find a link. Oh, there it was. And if someone wants to follow up, there are some CLs created from me. Yeah. My next step is to kind of integrate this with pod network, and I think we need to define what that means, and this is, I think, the next discussion we're going to be on. And you can look at this branch commits. The last commit kind of adds that network data. Yeah, I think that's kind of my update for now. As I move along, then we get some new updates. Okay. Last week we kind of started revisiting the kind of view of pod network. So I came back and said and admitted that the current view won't fly. We need a selector. Kind of that made us think that what the view should be of the pod network. And basically internally we started thinking of that even further as well between ourselves. And I think we came to this conclusion: what if we slightly change the kind of mindset that we had before? I think right now this is what we were thinking. You see my screen, my slide. I think you do, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So currently this is what we were thinking. Using multi-network DRA as a, I can make it slideshow so it's larger. To make it, I think that didn't help. To make it completely hide, and this is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was like a decision we made last year, exactly, like May or something, where we said, yeah, we want to hide the whole DRA behind a pod network, right? And what that meant is we would have some sort of config, and this is last week what we were thinking of. Let's have a config that then there's a controller, which this time is not provided by us, but it's provided by the DRA provider. See the kind of legend over here? It's kind of color coded who owns specific objects, right? So we were thinking, let's have a just whatever here, the provider decides that, and then there's a controller that's going to create the resource claim. That kind of was the gist of it. And then the same name sameness kind of allows us to kind of align one with the other, right? This is kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe we didn't talk about the last piece that I'm just saying, but this is how this was. That's how it would happen in my mind, right? That basically the controller from the provider, which has the full knowledge on how the resource claim should look like to the corresponding pod network, and then you just reference that in your pod. And I think the one thing that I've been internally hearing from our folks is that DRA is becoming making traction, right? And basically with this, we are kind of hiding and asking customers to learn yet another thing here through the pod network to kind of and hide the DRA aspect, which on the other hand might be not the best thing, considering like the DRA, the traction has like. So I think that the ask was, can we make maybe ride the wave of DRA with this as well? So kind of the proposal that I was kind of thinking is the next slide here, kind of changing the dynamics a bit. I'm not sure is that visible. That's probably small. I linked the presentation in the doc, so you can kind of zoom it in on your side. But basically, you can see the color coding slightly changes, right? And the main change is the pod network isn't an input on or isn't a abstraction for DRA anymore. We are putting DRA up front and center. So basically, user creates DRA claim becomes part of whatever user creates, right? So considering DRA is getting the attention, maybe that's okay or not, and we need to discuss that aspect. But let me kind of go through of what's changing and what happens, right? So pod network becomes notably an input to the DRA driver now, and you can see that it's still, because we still need the pod network. That aspect doesn't go away, right? We need the handle, and we need to group the endpoints in some ways, right? So pod network is that thing that we still want to keep that aspect, right? And we keep the kind of aspect of whatever you want to be in the config, it's up to you. But then this is an input to the driver and to the discovery phase of the driver, not to the piping phase of it. So the discovery phase is when we create the resource slice, right? And what we could do is propose a predefined, this is what we were thinking even last week, when we would have a predefined key, example this, pod network, that will point, and for each device, in addition to existing attributes, whatever the driver provides, it will always add the attribute of a pod network, right? If the driver supports pod network, right? So you can see now there is some device, an extra attribute is added as a pod network, right? There might be a bunch of other attributes that you can provide, but basically one of it, if you support pod network, would be a pod network attribute, and that will be part of a standardization, right? That we would say that when you support pod network, your driver shall has this attribute. And what that gives us then is whenever a user creates a claim, and however they want to create it, because right now, keep in mind, the name is not tied. This is my RC, so the name is whatever the user creates. And this kind of align with DRA because the claim or the template is part of the workload, right? What they say only here is from this driver, give me pod network X, BlueNet in this case. And basically that's it, right? So their expression kind of ends on this. And this is how we align things together with the network. And lastly, this is what we talked about last week as well. The output then has another kind of standardization where we would say in the data section, we provide similar thing, right? To kind of have the feedback for other features to catch up on, right? This is what we were talking. Maybe we can have a cell in the status of pod network to kind of how you will select those elements for that particular pod network. But as well, just having that kind of linkage, right? So you have a full path of providing the resource, adding each attributes of a pod network to a specific device, and then being easily able to reference that in your selector. And then, of course, the driver would have to properly provide the status of that device, right? I think the rest is kind of obvious. The class is whatever the DRA provider gives you. I think this is wrong because if it is a generic, so this would be a one that will be provided by DRA provider. Let me change this because that's what it is. It's not. It's for two. It's here because this generic driver will be class will be provided by the driver, right? When you don't have any extra special things, then you will just get provided by the driver. Questions and thoughts, please.
I have two comments. The first is that the label pod network BlueNet in the status could be retrieved already in the there's the status of what device has been allocated.
Yeah.
So you.
I see what you're saying. So that because there is the allocated devices, right? What you're referring to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then you can refer back to the resource slice.
But that's fine. But can that point me to a state of devices to this item? If it can, then you're right. We don't need that. I agree with you. But then there is another aspect of this where when you think about this, and this picture will be now right. If I go to the next slide, it's just slightly modified. Is this slide? If you go here, what I want to kind of call out is that this whole thing can be then hidden by the cluster administrator in a device class. And I think at that point you still would have it, what you're saying, Lionel, because then you have then there is this flag from class or from claim So we still would have it. But then question would be, can I link it with the status? Because what we want to have is this key to be linked with the pod network, right? That's the most important piece, right? So if we can do it other ways around, Lionel, then you're right. We probably don't need this item here.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to explain, but yeah, this status device points to status. I remember
Yeah.
I was looking for it, but the
I
status
have a
indicated
setup.
device, and then
Give me
pointing
2
back
minutes. We can look at it together quickly and see what's there. I am. Other questions, please. What do you think about that? Because I am proposing a big difference, right? This was abstracting the whole thing, the array hidden. Now we are doing front and center resource claim. Pod network is only a selector now in the resource claim. What that gives us another thing is automatic support for the per pod config, right? We don't have to come up with some additional attachment object. You have it here right away, right? Your resource claim can be, as we talked, it can be a template or it can be a single claim. Claim can be shared across multiple things as well. So per pod, per namespace, whatever, you can define your own set of configuration, right? Or even per pod, right? Static IP, special flags additional for this set of pods, but still linking to the same network. And here you can see I simplify this, right? I assuming the BlueNet is provided by the cluster administrator, where he prepared for me the class with the selector already for the pod network, right? So this is simplified. And keep in mind, I'm trying to make it simplified. This will be something viable because this, let me go back to the clean one, because asking customer or anyone like to write this code, it's a code basically. For us, it's easy, right? But imagine someone that doesn't. It might be tricky, right? So this is something that we can even hide. So that basically you reference to a specific class, right? And you're done. So another thing to kind of do. I am kind of convinced about this one, but I want to hear your community because this is still a proposal. I think the other thing that we are getting out of this is here you would have to constantly sync up how you create your controller and your resource claim. I'm thinking this is still beta, and then V1, any changes here, you would have to adjust constantly and adjust, right? Your controller to create a proper thing here, right? Something that it goes away with this other approach, right? We don't care. Basically, we ride on DRA configuration and whatever capabilities. Think of every DRA cap that's coming. It's kind of you get advantage of it directly. The permissions they're gonna come up with, it's gonna just address here as well. Pod network becomes a resource directly, and then basically you define who can attach to it, right? And that comes through the DRA direct kind of approach for the allowing stuff.
And Mohsin, just shortly about the red block. So from a cluster administrator, the DRA drivers, including of course the DRA or the device classes resource slice, will be deployed. Let's say installed them.
Mm-hmm.
So on. How does that relate to the pod network object?
So how I'm seeing, and this is what if we are okay with this is what I would like to try with the DRA net, where it's going to have a reconciler on top of pod network, and basically this item, this section is an input to my discovery part of the DRA driver, right? So,
Okay.
and this is where I think Gaurav has as well some comment where what does that really mean then, right? Do we have to have that, or maybe we can maybe get away without it, where we can automate some sort of this labeling? But I don't think we can, because I still want to have a direct explicit linkage to a pod network for each device. And what I mean here is by the driver, like DRA-net, for example, without anything, it already lists all the network interfaces, the nodes interfaces, right? Without anything, right? And then it's up to you how you decide to write your driver. And what I mean by that is, do you just want to be, you want to work both ways, where I can list everything and then pod network is just an additional input? What that means by additional input is that if I see pod networks, then I would add this additional attributes, this additional attribute to the devices I already listed that this pod network points to, right? So basically, this can even be additional selector stating like the cell expression, right, for you, depending on what you, because this whole section is up to you, right? So so you can as well just go by this, right, and ask the pod network to have this type of stuff where you say, okay, I want to select devices that have attribute X, right? And then DRA driver sees that and then adds that attribute to those type of devices. It can be that type of thing, and it's basically up to the implementation to decide on how they want to do it, right? The other way will be just, yeah, my driver is only for multi-network. Let's say that's the case, right? And basically, it's only gonna work with pod network. What that means is this driver does nothing, lists nothing until there is a pod network created. Then that's the kind of different approach on how you can write the driver, right? And both are valid. It's up to the implementation on how their product is going to behave and treat it and how it's going to work, right? You see the difference?
Yeah, no, sure.
And you see, because that gives you kind of the flexibility of how you want to approach this. The one aspect of this is, let me add that, Masaharu, give me a second. We're thinking of adding the enabled flag here in the pod network, and maybe there might be additional. So those are two standardized fields that we have today in the pod network that we kind of agreed on, right? The provider means who owns this this object, and then enable flag to control a new pod adding to myself, right? So this is something that has to be respected by your driver or your implementation, right? And you have to implement it in some ways. I think the recommended way from what I can think of from top of my head is, if you're supporting pod network and you see enabled false, your DRA driver should withdraw all the resources, right? Or we should just basically withdraw all the resources, saying, yeah, there is no resources, no more available resources for that pod network. So that's something that your driver then signs up for when it supports pod network, right? We have to kind of, the standardization things has to be kind of listed out, right? Like providing the attribute, maybe this data or maybe not. This is what we can check in a second to what Lionel was saying, but that will be kind of the consequences of you supporting pod network, right? Masaharu?
Yeah.
I have okay. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question about this DRL driver. So, DRL driver creates resource slices before create the pod network. So pod network doesn't kick the DRL driver to create resource slice. Is it right?
So it can be both ways. As I mentioned, what I was saying, right? The DR driver can be either that it will not kick in until the pod network exists, right? Or I want my DR driver to be very generic and support all the work even without pod network. And in that case, I will list those devices always, whatever I'm listing and whatever I'm supporting. And then when I see a pod network with my predefined configs, I add the attribute pod network into those devices that kind of apply, right? So it can go both ways, Masaharu. Do you see that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe I understand. Sorry, I am good. I'm not good at English conversation very much. So yeah, I will review the discussion after this meeting. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. So it can do the two ways that you described, right? That it can prepare before what you were saying, or it can go that it will only when the pod network is created, right? So you can, and it's the DRA driver decision on which way to go and how to do it. Okay.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
To add on top of what Marche said, I'm looking at this in some very simple terms, like a pod network is some kind of a dynamic configuration which you are providing to your DRA driver. And the pod network can influence the behavior of what your DRA driver is doing in some way or the other. So in this way, what we are trying to say is the pod network could influence the behavior in such a way that the DRA driver starts either publishing these new devices which it previously wasn't publishing, or the alternative, which also Maciej called out, is that it starts adding these pod network device attributes so that it ties in with the whole pod network ecosystem. So think of it like maybe some kind of a configuration for the DRA driver to behave in a certain way.
One more thing, I talked with John on this, and apparently DRA has a notion of how they called it, Gaurav, standardized names for attributes, something like that, like reserved names for attributes. And he even suggested that we could make this one of those, right? The pod network could be a standardized attribute in the array where only we can use it, right? And that's why I'm suggesting here, I'm not sure what is the format of this, but that's why I'm using Kubernetes IO as an attribute, right? It's not a driver specific attribute, it will be just a generic attribute for this, though my selector is different, but this is what I was saying, that this name, the key itself, plus kind of the requirements of what you put in would have to be somehow standardized, right?
It's also what I understood from the DRA community, that the idea is to have common attribute there.
Yeah, exactly, the commons attribute, and we can add pod network as one. At least if we agree on this whole thing gets approved, then we can go to DRA to say, okay, can we have a standardized pod network key as well?
I think if no one else has any questions, Maciej, there was this one question which just came to my mind. If you go back to the previous slide number 2. So I've started wondering, like, what exactly is the use case on why we want to standardize the pod network attributes. So for example, I think in this case now we are saying that the DRA provider is the one who also creates the device class. And in this case, maybe because the DRA provider is creating the device class, they can already include whatever selector they wanted to point to devices for that pod network, right? It need not be standardized because the DRA driver is now in control of that.
But in this case,
yeah,
I see what you're saying, but keep in mind that's not always the case, and this is the case that where user can create it. That's why I would prefer to get it standardized, because user creates this resource claim, right? And then on that case, there might be a generic one that doesn't have this defined. What you're saying, we will enforce people to, you have to create. Keep in mind, then you will have, because maybe that device class comes with the driver, which is installed once during cluster creation or maybe day 2 operation, but once. Then you're asking about for the DRA provider to have a controller to do, I would create you a class for every pod network, because pod network is a day 2 operation as well. Okay, so that would be the bit of a problem. So having that standardized kind of ease up the thing. I think this will be up to the cluster admin whether they want to provide this kind of capability of having a class for each network, right? But that's up to the class admin, not the provider. Okay.
Sure. I think I got the point. I mean, this to me at least overall sounds like a lovely direction in which we are heading. But just as a counter argument to what we were just discussing, I think the DRA driver could somehow just dynamically generate device classes as well. I don't know if this has been considered in some way. I don't know if this is like not the recommended way from the DRA driver. But anyways, I think that is just a minor point which we can flash out later on. But I see your point. It's totally valid to say like the reason why we want to standardize on the pod network attribute is because we want it to be, because we are expecting the device class to be somehow static in nature. And given pod networks could be created dynamically, so we don't want to like recreate device classes or update them. So that part
Exactly.
resource claim. Sure. That's a valid argument. Yeah. Thanks.
Other comments, folks, on this?
Have a question about the resource claim as a green box here. In reality, it can also be a blue box because the DRA driver could create a resource claim template based on the pod network that is being created, right?
Oh, you mean we can? That's perfectly fair. Yeah, exactly. So basically, your driver could be doing this as well. By the way, I think when you think closer on this, I think this approach doesn't preclude this one, right? You can still create claim templates with your naming and pointing to a specific. I think the one commonized thing that we would like to keep in mind is having this standardized, right? You provide the attribute, right? And then whether you create the claim or the template, it doesn't block you from not doing it. That's a fair point, Lionel. Yeah, because I think this solution doesn't preclude and blocks having this.
I think one thing that I'd like to point out over there is that if the DRA driver starts creating the resource claims, then perhaps the features that we are trying to expose through the slide number 4, which is like the user gets to control how it wants to configure the devices, may not be.
Oh yeah, that will be then. You're right.
Yeah. So, and given the fact that we want something like this, it would be nice if we don't complicate this space and we have an opinionated way, and we don't say anything like the DRA driver can create resource claims. We always like say it is the user that creates resource claims.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that this was possible.
Yes, that's totally possible. But
yeah,
and mostly work in certain use cases. But if there's use cases where we expect the user to create resource claims, it just complicates the space more.
But I think, Lionel, that's a fair point. That I think what it boils down to for us in this case is that the view of the pod network. Right now, I think we decided there is enabled, provided, and the config, and we have to approve it, of course. But that's the current proposal, to have those 3 fields, where config is a free form, whatever you want, right? But depends on the driver. And the other standardization would be we provide for the devices that are related to a pod network will have an attribute added to it. I think that's another standardization we have to agree upon. And then last item will be on this one, and this is just and with an asterisk too, which we can. Let me quickly check. Can I show a quick setup that will show that to us? Let me see. I have a setup. Let me check whether I can.
I would have also another comment on this. I don't know if you just do something else, the presentation, or.
Let me see. Do I have something? I don't have nothing. So. What do I want to see? I want to see a resource. Yeah, I do have that. Let me share this. How can I? Okay, let me stop sharing and let me share the screen. Here, this guy share. So this is the ArrayNet output. This is what I was saying what I did, right? So my config, this is the spec for the claim that I created. The request is just class, and I put my filtering in the class, and you can see it in the status what you were saying. So basically, let's see at that. So we have allocations, devices, and node selected, no resource, right? So we have the device driver pool, right? So this is what I got, if I'm not mistaken. And then in this, I think this aligns with that, right? Because I copy pasted those device
Yes.
driver pool, right? So those
Yes.
three things here. Is there a chance that I can have something that won't align?
In KEP 5075, there is a shared UID that will be added.
Oh, really? Between those two?
Yeah. Yes. Because we will be able to create virtual device
Exactly.
based on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So fair that the last piece is not needed then. Then if there is going to be additional UID between the two, then that everything's there. You can match those, right? So we don't need the. You can look at which because here if you look at it, it's from claim and from class. So if you put wherever you put it in here, right, whichever option you put it in, you will see pod network equals something, right? One trick will be getting that information, because you will have to parse the cell expression.
The cell expression
Because not
will
execute
not be
it, you have to say again.
The cell expression will not be in the OPAC config.
Oh, you're right. It's not
request.
here.
But
so no, that still doesn't work for us, Lionel.
No,
you're
but
right. I don't see the cell expression here. You're right.
No. What you need to do here is to take this device, driver, and pool and fetch it from the resource slice. And when you fetch it from the resource slice, you can get the attributes.
Oh, okay. I think DRNet does that. Yes, you're right. Because the DB is local memory, right? Anyway, as well, right? So that should be cheap operation, right, Lionel?
So we are fetching it within the DRA driver itself, right? So it already has that information.
Yeah, you're right. But keep in mind that's fine, but that's not the way you're gonna do it, Lionel. Keep in mind this is this status is gonna be read by your endpoint slice controller. This status is gonna be read by your endpoint slice controller, which doesn't have access to the DRA due to the so then the resource slice, the endpoint slice controller would have to grab the resource slice object as well.
Yeah,
so
it's more. And
so
it's,
add more additional. I am very strict, kind of pedantic on how many. I want to reduce as much as possible the API calls. So I would say we would need that data here.
The resource slice is also non-namespaced resource. So you need the cluster.
Yeah, exactly. So you would have to have more permission. So yeah, I would say we would have to have that. Are we agreeing on that?
So just confirming, the data that you want over here is the pod network attribute that we were trying to propagate is
yeah. So basically, let me get back to that. All right, stop share.
Yeah, I don't really know if this can be done directly in the result otherwise, but
yeah. So you could link it if you were to do it in the DRI driver. You're right, but
no. What I meant is that having another KEP that puts this information in the results of the resource claim status.
This will be very specific for pod network. We can try. I'm not saying no. You're right. We can try, but
I mean, I'm not sure if there's also use cases, but
yeah.
I had another question about something different. Did you want to continue on this topic? Or?
No. I think
before you go for next question, just to confirm. So the resource claim template will of course be something that, I don't know, DRA provider cluster admin handles, which automates the management of resource claim. However, if we would like, or an application would like resource claim, then it's something they can create, as Maciej is showing in here with the green coloring.
The blue coloring. Yes, that is correct, because this approach does not preclude this. You still your provider, you are a provider, can still have a control that will create a claim. That is correct. So I think the design text that will say it, we standardize on this, and then we standardize on the attributes and the data for now. Or maybe this can be done in somehow better. We can get to DRA to talk with them. Can this be somehow kind of better standardized beside that? Because the data is open text, right? So can this be better? But basically, those are the free, at least that I'm identifying, free contact standardization points, right? And then machine, as you said, right? You can, what I'm showing here, you can go by this, or you can automatically as well, you have a control that will generate the claim as well. That is
because
fair, yes.
both will be needed depending on what type of network resources. Some will be shared, some will be kind of like dedicated to.
So for that piece, we go with the kind of, now we have to push the array for those pieces, right? And I think there are the two caps that I talked with John that are relevant for us here is the partitioning cap. So let's read through that. I need to get into it. Need to read into that myself. And then the other one was the, I think, capacity. There is a capacity cap as well for the array. So those are the two that will fit into those other cases where I have a parent, and it can be used as, for example, because I had a situation where a specific parent interface can be used as a whole thing. For example, for the DPDK approach, right? I want to completely hijack it and do something about it. Or the interface can be used for as a parent for my MacVLAN, right? So it can be used both ways, right? And then if I use it as a DPDK, I cannot use on that node MacVLANs anymore, right? For that parent. And the partitioning, correct? Probably Lionel, maybe you know more about it because I haven't read. Partitioning is supposed to give us that power, where I can have those virtual interfaces that are dependent on some parent, and I can then use the parent as well for something else.
The partitionable is exposing this partition in the resource slice, and the difference with the consumable capacity. The consumable capacity is the 5075 that I talked previously, is the one where you can do this partition directly in the resource claim itself. So you can claim, for example, bandwidth, and you can create a MacVLAN on top of a host interface that is exposed in the resource slice.
All right. So yeah, I need to look at that then, because that's a, if I need to do some additional additional selector inside the claim to have this MacVLAN or what's a virtual device, that's not the point, right? We would like to say the pod network saying I am MacVLAN, right? And then here I'm just selecting blue. That's I think that's the goal. If
this you can do with the consumable capacity cap, you can do this.
Okay, but this partitioning should, okay, I need to read on it myself then and leave feedback on that, because what I'm getting at is the additional flags that a user should be defining here are only related to some small attributes like bandwidth, like, for example, I don't know what else, some QoS related things, but should not define or require. I think this is what I'm saying. It should be optional, and it should not be a requirement to say, like, for example, I want this pod network to be MacVLAN. This has to be defined via the resource slice completely, right? I should not be required to say in my resource claim that, oh, I want this to be a MacVLAN, right? So that's something that I want to avoid. And see,
I think this already work with the cap 5075 consumable capacity. That's
okay.
I think what you're mentioning is, I'm almost sure it's already possible. I will double check, and I will check also with the person responsible for.
Yeah, let me read on that as well, because I want to ensure that everything can be covered through the resource slice, right? And I can put just this attribute to the correct devices, and then because keep in mind I can have blue pod network attributed to a parent interface, and then I can have red network attributed to the MacVLAN interfaces on that parent. And then the thing here is if I am using the whole parent interface for something, my red network is not available on that node anymore. You see that, right? And then if I want to use, other way around, if I use just red network, that means you cannot use the blue network on that node because I am using the parent already as a parent, right? For my VLANs. So you cannot use blue network on that node. So I want this be kind of mutually exclusive, and resource slice to be able to kind of handle that for me. So yeah, let me read into those steps myself as well, because this is something that I need to achieve to kind of have that kind of capability. Other ways, I think there is a way to do it, and I think we internally do something like that, where basically your two-pod networks, you can validate two-pod networks across the board and say if they're both pointing to the same parent, that is incorrect configuration, and then you block one of the pod networks, right? Because you cannot have more than one pointing to the same parent, right? That's the workaround way to go about this, which I wouldn't want to kind of go. I wonder whether DRA can do better and provide me that cross mutual exclusive selection between devices, right?
But I think now I understand better your case, and I'm not exactly sure because it's between these two caps, this partitionable and this consumable that
exactly
needs to be
so
compatible for each other. So I'm not exactly sure.
But even going there, are we happy with this? Having those 3 points of standardization, at least for now, are we okay? Maybe I think the most contention thing is this one in the resource slide, that where we put the attribute. I think because that's where it boils down to, right?
I had two questions. Quick question about this. There's no way to enforce DRA in the pod network. So in reality, anyone could use this pod network with a backend that is different from DRA, right?
So I think the standardization would have to say that we are using the attributes. So that will be part of the standardization. So then that will preclude from what you're saying.
And the second comment that I had is to select all the resource claim that belongs to this pod network. We would need to do some kind of, we would need to fetch based on this status device data. And I don't really know if this is possible. Or is, I guess this is a expensive operation, or
you talk about this side, the
yeah,
resource claim.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's fair. This is something that we need to maybe look into, whether we can create a cap as you proposed, right? Because you're right. This is expensive because you have to grab every resource claim, which you probably there's no way go around this. Then you have to loop through all the devices in the status, and then loop and look up the data, right? And this is, I think, in the Go code, this is presented as a just simple text, raw text, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, right? So basically, you just will have to do include, and then that's kind of it's a character by character comparison of the selected string. Yeah, it might be an expensive thing to do. Yes. So I agree with you. Maybe there is some better way to do it. Maybe we can add it to the network data. if we pass this, if we get the pod network as a object, this will be the first place where we can maybe do this, where this guy has an optional field called pod network. That would be the best win. Well, unless we don't agree, but I think if we say the pod network is a standardized thing, then have a field here, right? And then we have a full win, right?
Yeah, the cap is still in beta, so.
No, that we can always add fields, Lionel. It's not a thing. Your stuff will be added, and then we can say that we will create another cap that will say that we want to add this additional field because now pod network is a sanctioned thing within Kubernetes, so we can add fields for this. I think this is where to add fields to other resources for pod network, we have to have this guy sanctioned, right, and approved by everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then we can push for and basically that's a good point. Resource claim will be the first example of us putting a reference for pod network, which will be a big win for and the kind of the main thing of what we want to do.
But this is a chicken and egg problem, I think, because unless we are
No,
able to
right now that's a
define
fair
the
point.
whole space, right? We cannot say we have defined pod network then. So we need to
No,
figure
and that's a fair point. But then we have a workaround for now. For now, we have a workaround. This is like an annotation, right, for this. And yes, it's expensive, but we want to do better. And long term, we can propose that. But as you said, it's a chicken egg issue, so we cannot propose things that doesn't exist. Yeah, we have to do it in phases. So then we can say that you can eventually just use a new field here that will be better, right? We'll see. Maybe that won't be possible because of the what I want to say. This is a core object, right? And if we were to add pod network in a core object, for me it will be great win because this is what we always wanted. But this might get a pushback. We'll see. All right. So are we at least for this attribute? I think because this is the biggest item. Are we all okay arguing on this?
I don't
Yes.
have any other comments, and yeah, I think I'm good with
Okay.
this.
So I think for what you all said, one important aspect is, and this is what I want to update my initial design draft, where I'm going to change I will remove all the notions about controller. Not all. I will mention it that you can have a controller that will create your resource clay template. It's up to you, and it's up to the implementation. How you do it is all up to you. And you can as well. The pod network can be an input to the driver. The one thing that basically what we would just define is the view of the pod network and the kind of standardization points. For now, we know of, I would say, this one. I think this one needs more discussion and POC to see how that looks like, right? Because this one I see it's an expensive thing to look up the data and see whether we can do better. Maybe in the array we can talk and see is there a means to provide some sort of standardized data for each of the devices. We can maybe look at the other fields, see if there's something. But at least this piece and then the view of the pod network. Do we have any context, any other comments on the view of the pod network itself? I think we have 3 fields here, right?
Mashay, one final question on the attribute standardization.
Oh, okay.
Will that be a mandatory field or an optional one?
That will be a mandatory. I'm trying to make it a mandatory. So basically, if your driver supports pod network, it has to have this attribute added to the devices that correspond to the pod network. That's a mandatory thing that I want to make. That's why I'm asking for it. Yes.
Yeah, the reason it's because today you can use the DRA API to define network interfaces, at least not standardized, fully standardized, but without that mandatory attribute. That's the reason why.
No, I think it still shouldn't preclude you from doing the same. It's because it's more direct because there is a bunch of attributes on each device, right? And one of it will be pod network. I would assume only one on or maybe probably only one device, whether it's and basically in virtual case this will be a group of devices, but in a normal world you're probably going to have only one per node for that network, right? Unless of course it boils down to how you design, because I assume you can have multiple node interfaces which are connected to the same VLAN, and those can be part of the pod network, and you can do that as well, right? But then if you want to have a more refined filtering of the resources that you align, right, you can still do that in your resource claim. But then the one aspect that's kind of required is, depending on how you define your network itself, right? Let's say, and that definition, what I mean by for a network, is it the same subnet or is it the same VLAN, for example, right? Because what you want to achieve with that network, right? Let's say you want to achieve full connectivity and basically have the ability to run serviceability on top of this, then everything has to be able to interconnect, right? So it has to be, for example, the same VLAN. So that's the attribute you have to kind of make sure that that is common across those interfaces that you put the attribute to. I'm not sure you see that, but I think you should be. It's not. It's. I want to make it mandatory, but it shouldn't be restrictive if you want to slice and dice your devices and resources however you want. That's at least that's in my mind, but I might be wrong. So we can continue this discussion next week as well. And if you have an example, think about an example where when this won't work, the enforcement. Is that okay, Machine? Can you do that?
Yeah, yes, of course, Machine.
Let's think about an example where that enforcement of an attribute will break a use case for you. Okay,
right.
I think we are over time anyway, but let's continue the discussion next week. Okay, then. Is that right? Or is that okay, Machine?
Yeah, of course, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.